Hi everybody, welcome to 2 Out the First. It's May the 18th, 2023. I'm Ryan Ballangy, and it's good to have you here with us. Been a little while since we've done a show, been doing some traveling. Went to ShopRite LPGA Classic Media Day up in Atlantic City. Very excited about the tournament there. It's about as close as we have here in the DC area to a regular LPGA tour stop. The community supports it really well. I got to spend some time talking to Megan Francella, who's a former LPGA winner, and she's now teaching pro at Philly Cricket Club, which is an amazing place. And she's doing a great job there. She's been exempted into the tournament this year in Atlantic City, well, Galloway Township is what the town's called. So spent some time talking to her, got ready for the PGA, and then all of a sudden, here we are, it's Thursday afternoon. So thank you for patience on the shows, and we've got a couple of things to talk about. Not a whole lot has happened, really, in the last few days, but we obviously have some things to talk about. One LIV thing, one Tiger thing, and then we'll bring it all together here at the end. So, let's start with LIV. You probably know I was going to talk about this. If you watched the show before, if you're seeing it for the first time, you probably won't be surprised that it's a topic, given how much that seems to kind of come up in the 6 months that we've done this show. But the first topic is LIV, and LIV's horrendous TV ratings, and what's going on there in terms of reporting, and the backlash about it, and all of that. So, the first bit of embarrassment comes on Sunday afternoon, when a number of CW affiliates, they have a two-year deal with Nexstar Media Group, which owns pretty much all of the CW affiliates, and a bunch of them, I don't know exactly the number, but a lot of them, decide they're going to pull away from LIV Golf with 4 holes left. 4 left. And they eventually go to a playoff, by the way, that Dustin Johnson wins over Brandon Grace and Cameron Smith. And they decide they're going to pull away from these affiliates to go put on literally anything else. Some infomercials, some news, some reruns of comedies and other dramas and other shows that they air typically on weekends before LIV Golf existed or other non-LIV weekends. And Arlo White, who covers the play-by-play announcing for LIV Golf, said, oh, well, you'll have to tune into the CW app or the LIV Golf website, CW website, depending on where you're located to watch the rest of this. And that was quite embarrassing, really embarrassing, because if that wouldn't happen on a PGA Tour telecast. Now, it might happen on an LPGA telecast, and I'm still kind of mad about that for the U.S. Women's Open a couple of years ago. But on a PGA Tour telecast, that would never happen. The CBS or NBC would stay with it until the end, until it got to the point where it was like primetime programming, which it never goes that long. But if that were the case on a regular PGA Tour event, they would cover the darn thing till the end, and they wouldn't ship it off to Golf Channel or streaming. They would do that for some other tours. Do not get me wrong about that. But for the PGA Tour, they wouldn't. And that's kind of a blow to LIV Golf, which has this assertion that it's just as good as the PGA Tour, and that has this great television partner in the CW and Nexstar, and that so many people are watching it, there's a ton of demand for it, but then you've got all of these affiliates, which, by the way, Nexstar basically promised and LIV promised would cover 100% of the tournaments 100% of the time, and that's clearly not happening. And you might go, well, if you're a LIV fan, you might go, well, the pushback in the deal is that because the LIV deal was just for these specific hours, once the window is over, all of the affiliates are out. And that may be true. I do not know the agreement. I know from what I've read and what I've kind of surmised, it's a 2-year deal. That, to the extent of it, that's what I know about the length of it. I don't know what CW or Nexstar have agreed to in terms of a coverage window or even a percentage of total coverage. There may be some stipulation in there about the total hours amongst all affiliates of total tournament time covered. I don't know that. But what I do know is it looks ridiculous when you've still got a fourth of your final round to go, and your affiliates walk away from broadcasting it. I don't care if the deal is to air it from 1 to 6 or 2 to 7 or whatever it is, 5 hours, 4 hours, I don't care. There should have been a provision in there, if there isn't, to cover playoffs in full, by the way, in full, and there should have been some kind of indication that this was very obvious that this would happen. These things that have playoffs, how could you have not thought of that if you didn't think of that? And if you're LIV and didn't think of that, that's embarrassing for you, because this should be on your mind. You had a playoff. I mean, you've been in playoffs. Like, Greg Norman's been in playoffs. He's been in some heartbreaking playoffs. But that happens in professional golf. So I don't understand how that happened. I don't understand the oversight, and I don't understand the defense of it. That, oh, this was happen on the... No, it would not happen on the PGA Tour. So that's one part. Looks bad, and it's unfortunate because one of their most popular events last year, I think was the one in... I think it was Boston, maybe Chicago, I don't remember. But the one that went to a playoff with Dustin Johnson where he won with like an eagle on the last hole. So he's won both of his LIV events in interesting playoffs. And playoffs usually generate a lot of buzz. They get people to watch because people start to talk real quickly. They flip the channel, watch it. It's a quick playoff, usually 15, 20 minutes. We're done. Well, you got no one in a bunch of your markets that could watch it because Blackish was on instead, or another episode of, I don't know, Charmed or whatever rerun they air on the CW on the weekends. That was on instead. Rizzoli and Isles, I don't know. One of those types of things. That's bad. That not only is bad from an optics standpoint, it's bad on missing out on the audience standpoint. Then add in the news. I believe this was from yesterday on Wednesday. And I think this came from James Colgan at golf.com. And I don't think this was a surprise to anybody because of recent weeks. We'll talk about all this in a second. But LIV is not going to basically announce their audience numbers for the rest of the season. They're just not going to do it. They don't have any intention of telling people how many people watched, what the audience looked like, any of that kind of thing. And that's particularly embarrassing because the CW chose not to have Nielsen try to measure anything for them, and they chose to go with another firm, it's called iSpot, and they do kind of a total audience thing that they talked about after the first couple of events, namely after the first event where I think they said they had like 3.2 million people who saw some piece of it, which that I think that includes television and online perhaps. But for the TV ratings, we were fed information kind of offhand from Nielsen, which wasn't really contracted to do the ratings for these events, but they have access to this data. They can do it. They don't necessarily get paid for it, but they have access to it. And they had a big drop from 550-ish thousand people in the first event on average to down near 300 or 400 some in the second event. So they lost like 24% in the second event. It was probably worse for the next couple of events after that because that's the way this stuff works, right? First event, curiosity. Second event, a little bit of a drop. Third event, that's your real telltale because then you know whether you held on to people from that second event. The first one is a lot of curiosity. Second one, you start to kind of coagulate your audience. Third, you try to consolidate that audience, and then you try to hold on to that for as long as you can. And that was the Orlando event that Brooks Koepka won. That I thought was pretty interesting. I mean, Koepka winning was certainly a good lead into the Masters, but then you had two events outside of the United States on tape delay for the next two. So then you had the Australian event, which was a tremendous hit in terms of total attendance in person, it seems. And then you had the Singapore event, which both those were won by Taylor Gooch. Not as rowdy of an atmosphere in Singapore. A little bit of a different world there in Singapore compared to Australia and Adelaide. So not as good ratings there. And we knew that. We knew that was going to happen. But then you had the tournament in Oklahoma. You come back to the United States, lead into the PGA Championship, figure, okay, maybe get a little bit better attendance. And they did. They got, like 8 to 10,000 people a day. And who knows how many of those are comps or paid. I'm not here to dispute that. I don't have the interest in doing that right now. But you had a good solid in-person base for this event. You had an event in the United States. You had an interesting finale because you had a playoff. And probably very few people watched it, relatively speaking. And now they're just not going to tell people the rest of the way what the ratings are, which leads you to believe for a brand that has worked and a league that has worked so hard to tell you anything and everything positive that they're not talking about it means it's really bad. Not bad, really bad. And is really bad, I don't know what that metric is. Are you comparing yourself to a PGA Tour event, to Golf One Cable otherwise, to any kind of tour on a network? Are you trying to compare yourself to the LPGA when it gets on network TV, or the very rare event where the DP World Tour might find itself on network TV? Something like that. Is it that number? Is it bad scheduled LPGA event at random times every day bad? I don't know, because the LPGA gets some god-awful television times from Golf Channel, and it's really frustrating. So what's the number? We're not going to know. And I don't think Nielsen's going to try and go out there and keep revealing this data, because at this point they clearly don't want it out there. And that could cause some problems for Nielsen, I imagine. We don't need that, I guess. But all that to say, if you thought this was picking up traction, it's clearly not. It's clearly not, because otherwise, if it were maintaining audience, if they were gaining audience, we would know about it. We would hear about it constantly, and we haven't. And that's got to be frustrating for the people on LIV, because obviously they're trying to build up something here to compete with the PGA Tour. They went out of their way to create this television deal where they earn no money up front. It's all rev share, which if there's no rev, there's no share. And they abandoned, I think, the one thing that really set them apart, which was putting all of their rounds live on YouTube for the world to see. Yes, the numbers may not have always been great. In fact, they rarely were after the first couple. But they had something there that a younger generation, a younger group of people could watch and maybe cling on to, because it was something they could consume from anywhere. And yes, you could still download the CW app or whatever. People aren't doing that. You had the app that was on literally everybody's phone in YouTube, and you went away from that to go to the CW. And for what? To say you were on television? I don't think that was kicking it. So now, what do you do from here? If you were the Saudis, you have bad TV ratings, you haven't spent billions of dollars in something that not many people are watching on TV, certainly not in the United States market. You may have global markets that are working for you. I don't know international TV numbers. But this is the one where you got to make the money. This is the one where you've got to do it right. There's not enough rights fees in most other major global television markets to make it work. This is the only country where we pay boatloads of money for sports on TV. And if you're not doing it well, then you're not doing it at all. And I think that's going to be a problem, because now they've got a lagging business model. They've got poor ratings. They've got these embarrassing blips about being taken off TV by their affiliates, many of which still refuse to show LIV live on TV, even though LIV said they were all going to do it. And it's just kind of there. How long do you continue to do that before you go, you know what, this isn't worth it? It didn't work. And do you throw more money at it to try to make it work, or do you just go, we're good, I don't want to do the court discovery anymore or the testimony in the suit against the PGA Tour, I don't want to deal with the CW anymore, I just want out? Does that happen? Does that happen this year or next? Who knows? No idea. But the string of embarrassing things that happens is not good. It's not good for that product. It might be good for the bigger spectrum of things, but it's not good for that product. To that end, to the LIV end, right, I want to talk a little bit about something Zach Johnson said. Zach Johnson was asked kind of head of the PGA Championship this week as the sitting American president or Ryder Cup captain about LIV players and who he's going to pick. He's got 6 picks. Who's going to be on the team? Starting to think about that. We're not that far away. 4 months away from deciding these teams, basically. Less than that. And he's got 6 picks. He's got to have some players on the radar, right? He's got to be thinking about that. And he kind of gave, frankly, a stupid response. It made him sound like he hadn't been watching golf this entire year. But he said, quote, there's maybe a couple of guys that have come close to securing their spot in the top 6, which means they're the automatic picks. But when it comes to picks, it's not even on my radar, especially given how many points are still out there. I think it would be premature and also irresponsible to even go into that. It's not on my radar right now, end quote. Which was kind of a way of trying to dodge whether or not someone like Dustin Johnson or Brooks Koepka, I guess even Taylor Gooch, would be worthy of getting a pick to be on the Ryder Cup team. Now, it is still possible for LIV players to earn Ryder Cup points. They have not been explicitly banned. If they play in the majors, they can earn a whole ton of points, because it kind of came up during the Masters when Phil and Reed and Koepka did very well, that if they had, any of them had won the Masters, they were basically in a position where they were going to be on the Ryder Cup team. And that would create a whole set of problems, right, for the PGA of America that really has gone out of its way to say, out of both sides of his mouth, we want peace and harmony, but the business model stinks and we don't know what they're doing, kind of thing. And Seth Waugh has been interesting in that regard. I think candid, but interesting. And now you've got Zach Johnson sitting here going, well, I haven't even thought about it yet. You can't say that. You had to have thought about it when you saw Brooks Koepka on the leaderboard, when you see Dustin Johnson has won twice on LIV, when Taylor Gooch wins 2 times in a row. I realize that we have talked about this before, that LIV golf is not Ryder Cup golf, it's not PGA Tour golf, it's designed to be super low at 20 under through 3 rounds kind of thing. I get all of that, but you can't sit there in a news conference and sound like you haven't done any research or watched any golf all year just to evade a question. I don't like it, and I wish you wouldn't have done it that way. But I do want to comment on that because it struck me as particularly ridiculous That you couldn't just say, hey, they are on the, you could give a much more diplomatic response. Hey, they are on the radar. I'm not sure yet. There's still a lot of events left. He said something about not knowing the venues that they're playing. Frankly, it doesn't matter because no one knows Marco Simone from the American side, and it's not that big of a deal architecturally to go play there. So what difference does it make whether they play Dirt Track A or Country Club B? I don't understand. I just didn't like the response, and that really stuck up in my craw a little bit. I do want to get to this final piece of a follow-up from, I think this was our last show that we did, when we talked about a court hearing in Florida relating to Erica Herman, who is Tiger Woods' ex-girlfriend, her lawsuit against Woods and the trust that owns his Jupiter Island mansion, in saying that she wanted to be relieved or excused from a NDA, a non-disclosure agreement that she signed at one point in their relationship, that basically if they had any legal issues or any kind of major complaints outside of actual prosecutorial law, that they would have an arbitration. They would have an arbitrator handle it. It would be done privately, not in public. And the reason that she filed this was because she wanted to sue for something like $30 million, and she wanted to sue to get out of the NDA because there was a new federal law that passed that basically dissolved NDAs in the event of some kind of sexual assault or sexual harassment related to the NDA. And her claim was that because that she was the general manager or a high-up employee at Woods' restaurant in Jupiter, Florida, that she experienced a form of sexual harassment because Woods was her boss, and that would allow her to escape from the NDA, sue in public, and kind of make a thing of this. Well, in the end, the hearing that happened in Florida in Judge Elizabeth Metzger's court, she seemed very skeptical of Erica Herman's claims through her attorney, and the attorneys themselves said they didn't even know if she signed was forged, the copy that they brought to court was real, all these kinds of strange allegations. Metzger wasn't having any of it, so it kind of signaled what was likely to happen. We found out, I believe yesterday, might have been this morning even, that Metzger wound up ruling against Erica Herman. So from Golf Channel, Brex Hoggard's been on this one. Judge Metzger ruled that Tiger Woods' unlawful eviction dispute with his former girlfriend must be decided in arbitration required by the NDA that both parties signed. In her 11-page ruling, which was issued late Wednesday, which is why we're talking about today, found out today, Metzger said Herman's claims of authenticity of the non-disclosure agreement, which her lawyers discussed, were not enough to force an evidentiary hearing. Herman sued Woods and that trust that owns his South Florida mansion for $30 million, which she claimed was the amount of rent she would have had to pay for living in a similar beachfront home for 6 years where she had lived with Woods when they were together, which unto itself is kind of ridiculous. Herman claimed that Woods had promised to allow her to live in the mansion for 11 years, but the two ended their romantic relationship last fall. And in the end, this is obviously kind of what you thought might happen given what came up in the hearing and with the skepticism with which Metzger kind of discussed these claims from Herman, who wasn't there, neither was Woods, but with their attorneys. And in the end, the claim from from Herman was declined. And Metzger says in her ruling, quote, Herman does not deny that the signature on the NDA is hers or that she agreed to arbitrate. And the ruling concluded that Herman has, quote, made vague and threadbare references to behaviors or actions she contends constitute sexual harassment, and that her claims were, quote, implausibly pled, end quote. Basically saying, unless you can prove some kind of sexual assault or serious sexual harassment, you're going to go to arbitration, which is exactly what Tiger wanted, exactly what Tiger's attorneys wanted. And if they agreed to a specific arbitrator, they probably agreed to one that would be likely friendly to Woods. So in the end, this is all going to go away. It's all going to go private. And Erica Herman's going to get what she's going to get. But I imagine it's not going to be a whole lot coming out of this other than having this go public, everyone knowing that things didn't work out here. And I think that's something people knew anyhow. And it's just an unfortunate situation. I mean, people break up all the time. Lives change. People move on. I have no idea how Woods conducted his business here. I'm not here to judge that. I don't know how Erica Herman conducted herself in the relationship. I don't know that either. So it's just kind of one of those things that plays out in public, and you go, why did this have to happen in the first place? Because you've already set up a system where it didn't have to. And I think in the end, that means Herman most likely made these accusations in hopes of trying to get out of this relationship with a better economic situation than when she began it, because she's gotten used to being in this kind of economic situation when she was with Woods. Again, I don't know where that leaves her. I don't know if that will end up resulting in some kind of compensation from Woods through arbitration. We will never know that, I am certain, unless someone leaks it, which I guess Herman could do that later, but that's where it leaves us. And I just kind of wanted to do the follow-up to it because I had said originally when talking about it, we kind of left that to the side for a while to let the court system kind of let it play out, and it got to the point where we kind of had to talk about it, and now that it's basically done, we can be done talking about it. Hope you guys have a great week this week watching the PGA Championship. We'll be back tomorrow with another show, but it's going to be a wonderful week at Oak Hill. Rochester has put in so much work into this, and it was kind of in the weird situation of being selected for an August PGA before it moved to May. The renovation Andrew Green did looks wonderful. I think a lot of people are loving it, and I think it's going to be a great, great test for this championship. And unfortunately, because of the way this works, it may not get it again for a while, but hopefully the demonstration here, if all goes well, is that you can have a major championship in May in the Northeast, and it's not so much of a gamble that you can't do it or you don't want to do it if the venue's good enough and the support is good enough. And I say that as somebody in the Mid-Atlantic region that would kill to have a PGA championship, and can't wait to have one here at Congressional in a few years' time as part of a long relationship with the PGA of America. All right, that's going to do it for us today on Two Out the First. If you watch the show on YouTube, please consider subscribing to our channel, hit that like button, and also leave a comment. If you listen to us as a podcast on a platform that lets you do so, leave us a nice review, leave a comment, helps us reach more people. If you're connecting with us through some other way, thanks for spending some part of your day with us. We've greatly appreciated it. We will be back tomorrow with another episode of Two Out the First. Have a great day, everybody.